This is the video demonstration for the deep version of the GoPro housing with the internal battery pack. We have three housings here just to demonstrate the footprint of the housing and how large it is. As you can see, it's fairly large housing, and the reason for that is because these housings are meant for deep water application, and so the wall thickness of the housing has to be quite thick in order to withstand those high pressures at depth. The housing features a sapphire crystal front lens, and this front lens, the reason it's made out of sapphire is in order to withstand very high water pressures. If this lens were to be made out of normal glass, it would have to be at least an inch thick in order to withstand the pressures that this particular housing can withstand. In this case, the lens is actually 6 millimeters or about a 1/4 inch thick, and this thickness, this small thickness of the lens will allow us to maintain the optical quality of the GoPro camera. The sapphire crystal also has other features, such as it's very scratch resistant, and this particular lens is also coated with the AR coating, anti-reflective coating, in the broad band range, so it provides a very high quality optics for the GoPro camera. The housing features two sacrificial zinc anodes, and these zinc anodes act to prevent corrosion of the housing body when the housing is deployed for a long period of time in salt water. The housing comes with our vacuum valve and our leak detection system. It comes with easy to open and close latches. These latches allow for deployment of the housing very quickly. You simply slide the fixture plate into the housing and close the housing and engage the latches. Other housings that we've seen on the market, you have to use a screwdriver or some sort of a bolt in order to bolt the two halves together, and that takes quite a bit of time. So the latches allows you to deploy the housing very quickly. We have mounting holes on the top and also the bottom, and we have mounting holes here. These are 1/4-20 holes. However, we can make this housing with any sort of mounting configuration that you would like. These housings are completely customizable. I should also mention that we can put in any sort of connectors on the back here as well, whether you need power connectors or control cable connectors, subcon, or any sort of dry mate connectors, or we manufacture our own connectors as well, which are rated for about 500 meters. You can use those as well. In order to open up the housing, you have to open up the latches first, but before doing so, you want to make sure that the housing is not on the vacuum. Because of the way the housing is put together, the vacuum, if there's vacuum pressure inside the housing, it will not allow you to separate the two halves. So in order to release the vacuum is you have to open up this valve, and using your thumb just pull on the red tab and release the pressure. We recommend, when you're trying to disassemble the housing, that you work on a flat surface such as this and have a rubber mat to prevent damage or scratch to the housing body. The flat area also makes it easier to pry open the two halves, as we'll demonstrate here. In order to open up the latches, each latch has a lock mechanism. You need to push down on this lever and then open up the latch. Okay, once the latches are open, then you can try to separate the two halves. The housing is, while you're prying the housing open, you will notice that the housing is trying to resist because you're actually creating a vacuum inside the housing. So you want to do this with a bit of a force, and the two halves will open. This half of the housing is equipped with our leak detection sensor that connects to the leak detection app and can work by itself. We have the instruction how to use this leak detection system in the description below. It also has the vacuum valve as well. You don't want to set this this half of the housing aside on a surface with its O-ring side facing down. You always want to have it either sitting like this or sitting on its side, but never with the O-ring contacting a surface. This half of the housing is equipped with an axial dovetail groove, and this dovetail O-ring groove ensures that the O-ring stays in place and does not fall out of the groove. It requires very little maintenance, and you rarely need to take out the O-ring from the groove. All you need to do is make sure that it's lubricated properly. You can apply the lubrication with your finger like this. Just rub your finger over it and make sure that there's no dust or debris before you assemble the housing. If you do want to remove this O-ring for whatever reason, there is a drop hole at this side of the housing, and using a plastic O-ring removing tool, you can simply remove the O-ring and then pull out the O-ring from the groove. Never use a sharp object or a sharp O-ring removing tool, because that might scratch the sealing surface underneath the O-ring. This side of the housing is equipped with a radial seal, as you can see here. You can remove this this O-ring by pinching it and removing it that way. It requires very little service. all you have to do is run your finger over it and make sure it's properly lubricated. This is the bit that creates the most amount of friction when you want to put the two halves together and pry the two halves apart from each other. So you want to make sure that that o-ring is completely lubricated. The reason we use two types of seal is for maximum water protection. In case one of the seals fail, the other one is used as a backup. This other half of the housing also features the fixture plate and the battery plate that is bolted onto the fixture plate. When you want to remove the fixture plate, you want to set the housing on its front like this, and this is why we need a rubber mat like this, because we want to make sure that you're not damaging the front lens. In order to take out the fixture assembly from the housing, you need to unscrew this thumb nut. Set that aside and slide out the fixture plate assembly. So this is the fixture plate assembly that houses the battery plate, all the electronics to convert the voltage for the GoPro, and the USB-C cable. In order to mount the camera, you need to use the provided M2 screws. We supply 4 of these screws. However, we recommend using only 2, and the reason for that is because these threads on GoPro cameras are quite delicate, and if you're constantly taking out the GoPro and putting it back on the fixture plate, that might wear out the threads. So using only 2, you're guaranteed to be able to use the other 2 in case they strip or get damaged over time. We also recommend not tightening up these M2 screws too hard. All you need to do is just make sure that they're just finger tight like this, using a 1.5 millimeter Allen wrench or an Allen key, and now it's nice and secure. It's not moving anywhere. That's all that is required. You don't need to really tighten these things up. Now we need to attach the cable. The cable that we've provided with the battery plate is actually a bit longer than it's required, and the reason for that is we need some slack in the cable in order to disassemble it from the assembly. So in order to reduce that slack, we loop the cable like this, and then we insert it into the USB-C on the GoPro camera. This battery plate utilizes an NFPF750 battery. This is a Sony style battery that can be purchased anywhere, and it's very common. So just insert the battery into the battery plate, and this particular battery plate also has an indicator showing how much charge is remaining on the battery. At this point we can turn on the GoPro and just check to see if the power is supplied. And as you can see, the GoPro is on. At this point you can hit record and place the camera inside the housing and then deploy it. Or you can pair the GoPro with the GoPro app, and then after everything's sealed up and you're ready to record, you can use the app to record the image. This particular housing does not have any buttons on it to control the GoPro, so everything has to be done before deploying the housing. And the reason for that is because this housing is used for very deep water application, and those buttons cannot withstand the very high pressures that is required for this particular application. Once the module is placed inside the housing, you also want to use the thumb screw to secure it into place. The module is located using two precise dowel pins, and these dowel pins provide these dowel pins locate the fixture plate precisely with the housing and prevent it from moving or shaking or coming loose. As you can see, the module, the camera, the battery, everything is securely inside the housing, and there's no play in case there is some sort of a vibration from the ROV or from any deployment device that you're using. That vibration will not transfer into the camera itself, because it doesn't have an ability for it to move or anything like that. So it's very secure inside there. Before we close the two halves together, we want to check the O-rings, make sure there's no dust or debris on them, run your finger over them, make sure that they're lubricated, and inspect this sealing surface here on top here, because this is where the axial O-ring will mate to. So you want to make sure there's no scratches on that, there's no dust or debris or hair or anything like that. Make sure it's nice and clean. There is a locating pin on this half of the housing, as you can see here. This needs to mate with the locating hole on this half of the housing, and the reason for that is to prevent the two halves from rotating with respect to each other. Two ways to put the two housings together is you can either set them down like this and then bring the two halves together like this, or what I like to do is set this half of the housing on its front like this, and then by picking up the back end of the housing and making sure that the latches are not falling down, holding it like this, you simply put the two halves together, and as you bring them down, you want to do this gently and just do a little bit of rotation to make sure that that pin is actually engaging with the locating hole. Once the pin is engaged with the locating hole, the two halves will not rotate. And now you can lock the latches. So this video concludes the demonstration of the DEEP version of the GoPro housing. These housings are used extensively in submarine applications, AUV applications, ROVs that require very deep depths, and the battery pack allows you to record for a long period of time. This particular battery is rated for 6 to 7 hours of recording time, depending on how you use the GoPro, whether it's 4K or HD or what the frame rate you're using. The GoPro will use a different power, and also depending on the water temperature. So we do have other housings that can be deployed for a longer period of time, but this particular housing, the battery that is supplied with it is good for around 6 hours.